Leticia and myself, feel free to just make sure that that is the one selected. So Leticia and I are are thankful to be here. So oh, oh. Uh, we wanted to just first off thank you all for coming. I know you all have busy schedules and busy days, so we appreciate you taking the time to listen to what we have to say and really um, get more resources on how you can empower kids to say no to underage drinking and no to underage cannabis use. So the other thing we wanted to say thank you to is for Prevention First providing us the opportunity to be here and really speak to you and hopefully provide you with resources that you all can use in your coalitions and in your communities. So we kind of went through the bios already, so we won't be redundant in that. But the program that we have here is Ask, Listen, Learn, and that's what we'll be talking mostly about today. But Ask, Listen, Learn is a program of responsibility.org, which is where I work, and then also where Leticia is the on the educational advisory board. So to provide a little bit of background on responsibility.org, well, we are a national not-for-profit organization. Really with three main missions. We were founded over 30 years ago by America's leading distillers to fulfill these missions of eliminating underage drinking, eliminating drunk and impaired driving, and then also for those who are of age and choose to drink, making sure that they have the tools to make responsible decisions when it comes to alcohol. So that's where really we come from. Hopefully, by the end of today, you'll come away with a few things. So we'll begin today by going over some of the recent data on underage drinking and underage cannabis use, as well as some science, and Leticia will talk a little bit about brain science and brain development to understand why we're doing this and why specifically Ask, Listen, Learn is in this space with the middle school, upper elementary, middle school students. Additionally, we hope that you'll walk away with two evidence-based curricular resources for those who are interested in implementing this into schools. So, and then Leticia will talk about parent resources. I know in the chat some folks had questions about parent resources and getting into schools, and hopefully you'll have some resources that you can take right off the shelf and then bring to your schools and students. And then finally, with this information, you will be able to evaluate what you're currently doing and then look at ways to integrate Ask, Listen, Learn, our program, into those efforts. So like I mentioned before, feel free to ask any questions as you go through as we go through. We'll have a couple different sections or breaks where you can ask any questions. Ian, as Jada mentioned, will be in the chat. So if you see somebody just posting links, he's supposed to be there posting links. So feel free to click on those links. But yeah, we'll feel free to ask any questions. We'll be monitoring those and address those. Leticia, did you want to say anything before we get into anything?
Yeah, just welcome and good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today.
So we'll lay the foundation first by looking at underage drinking and then underage drinking or underage cannabis use. So some data that we want to really look at is data from Monitoring the Future. So if you're not familiar with Monitoring the Future, it's an annual survey that's done that looks at 8th grade, 10th grade, and also 12th grade substance use and alcohol use prevalence rates. So there's a lot of good news here. Specifically, underage drinking is down, but there are some things that I'll talk about that are factors that could cause it to increase that we need to be aware of as prevention professionals. So the one thing is really underage drinking is at or below pre-pandemic levels. And if you look at the chart here, this is for the 8th grade age band. And it's hard to see a little bit with the numbers, but it starts in 1991 and has been slowly going down since then. So a lot of the work that you all are doing is really having a significant impact on the prevalence rates for underage drinking. And it's currently at an all-time low at 19% for lifetime consumption, which is excellent. So we hope that the efforts that we're doing will continue to bring that number down. So that's great, but there's still work to be done, which is really the second part. Each year or every few years, we do a survey of kids and parents um, about different contributing factors to their why students who do underage drink underage, and also concerns that they might have about things like cannabis use, underage drinking, mental health, things like that. So there are two significant things that we saw in this past version from the 2024 version, where it's 1 in 5 students report that they've been offered alcohol, which if we could get that number to 0, that'd be great. And then additionally, over half of students think they'll be faced with making a decision about underage drinking within the next year. So what we're doing is important. The other key piece of evidence that really shows the importance of what we do is that the later we can, or the later that somebody drinks alcohol, the less risk there is for the alcohol use disorder later. So if we can postpone that first drink, the better odds that they won't have substance use or alcohol use disorder later in life. So that's the underage drinking part of what we'll talk about. The other aspect is underage cannabis use, which has similar trends, but there's some other contributing factors with this. But underage cannabis use has maintained its post-pandemic drop. You can see here there was a big drop around the pandemic, and it's still roughly around that. So the drop has maintained a bump the last couple of years, but back down to around 7% from the 11% it was in 2020. But with cannabis, there's a lot of other things going on with the changing legal landscape, in addition to things that are happening culturally in terms of perception of what cannabis is. So this is kind of where we're at with um, the data, which is a lot of good news, but also some areas where we can improve on this. So I'll turn it over to Leticia at this point, who'll talk a little bit about the brain development portion of this.
Ask, Listen, Learn is geared towards the middle grades. We're thinking primarily grades 4 through 8. And why is that? Well, we know at these ages, the brain is undergoing rapid changes. So we'll go to the next slide about the brain. And here you can see a diagram of the brain, the various parts of the brain, and what they're responsible for. The goal of Ask, Listen, Learn is to teach kids about the brain, how it works, what it does, and how the brain is affected by underage drinking and cannabis use. So our next slide. This diagram represents brain development from childhood to adulthood. And as you can see on the left-hand side, there's the 5-year-old brain, and it's a lot of different colors. And then as it shifts to the diagrams on the right, the preteen brain and the teen brain, those purple and blue parts show the parts of the brain as they're maturing. So you can see the 5-year-old brain, of course, not fully developed yet, preteen brain still undergoing development, the teen brain more mature, but it's not until kids get to their 20s that the brain is fully developed and more mature. So the preteen brain and teen brain, what we want kids to understand through our materials is that their brains are still very much developing. So we know from brain development, from birth to age 6, new connections are being formed. This myelination process, these connections, we know at birth, there are certain things that new parents do to, ensure that these connections are being formed. Things that are, auditory, reading, talking to your child, reading to your child, showing them things that are very, black and white and very have a lot of graphics to them. These help these connections occur. And so at age 6, you can see that all these connections are formed. And then by age 14, those connections are now being pruned. So those connections that were formed from birth to age 6 are kind of being pruned as that new learning occurs during the ages of 9 through 13. So this intense learning and brain development is really a characteristic of puberty. And so early goal setting, prevention education, and decision making skills really contribute to the overall health and well being that kids experience in high school.
So when we developed the Ask, Listen, Learn program, which is our free underage drinking prevention program, the most recent iteration was developed in 2017. And we sought out really to make sure that it is really addressing the issues of underage drinking, but also doing it at a time where students are best able to hear it. So we chose the grades 4 through 8, really ages 9 through 13, as our target audience. And we did that because there's a lot of different things going on that Leticia alluded to. Their minds and bodies are changing so much, and there's just this natural curiosity of what's going on with my body? How do I understand how that affects me? So we use this to really tap into this natural curiosity. Um, Also related to this, a lot of schools and a lot of districts are learning about the body systems in health classes and science classes at this time anyway. So there's a natural curricular inclusion that we can tap into with this. And then finally, from a social perspective, a lot of students are becoming more independent. So in middle school, upper elementary school, they might be doing things that they weren't allowed to do when they were in lower elementary school. They might be like taking the bus home by themselves or walking home or things like that. So there's a lot more independence. There's a lot more decision making that's happening at this time in their development too. So they're experimenting, and then with this independence and decision making, there's risks for other non-healthy decisions that they can do too. So what we wanted to do is really tap into this at a point before they are exposed to maybe being offered a drink at a party. So they have the tools and the skills to make these decisions ahead of time. So the other elements of this of why it's at this level is middle schoolers are more likely to make healthy decisions when they know a few things. First off, tapping into that brain health. If they know how the brain works, they're more likely to take brain health seriously. Same thing if they know the different parts are responsible for it. They're more likely to make better decisions. And then what Leticia said about how their adolescent brain is still developing, knowing that their brains aren't fully developed helps them kind of have a better understanding of, you know what, I might need to take a few seconds before making this impulsive decision because my amygdala is more developed than my prefrontal cortex and things like that. So having them with that information is going to be helpful as they see this information. So I'll turn it over to Leticia to give an overview of the program.
Great. So today we're going to cover how to empower students to make healthy choices with free Ask, Listen, Learn resources. And I just saw that Ian put a link to our website in the chat. So you're welcome to take a look at that now as we're talking, or certainly after. But our website is asklistenlearn.org. And so asklistenlearn.org, if we could go to our next slide. Oh, next slide, please. What it is, it's free underage drinking prevention, and it's really designed for kids in grades 4 through 8 or about 9 through 13. And we get asked a lot, can this material be used for younger ages or high school ages? And the answer is yes. You know the students and the families that you work with the best, so you can certainly take any of our materials and adapt them to those that you work with. Of course, for younger ages, just make sure the language is appropriate and they can understand. But certainly, what I'm going to cover about our resources, the topics about science and the brain are certainly applicable to high school ages as well. So Ask, Listen, Learn answers these questions. It answers, how does the brain work? How alcohol affects it? And then how does that affect you? So really, it teaches kids the why behind the no, it's not okay to drink until you're 21. And the core of that answer is it's because your brain and your bodies are still developing. So Ask, Listen, Learn consists of 7 animated videos. Each of the videos teach students about different parts of their brain and how they're affected by alcohol. So for example, there's one video about alcohol in the overall brain. And then there are different videos, 6 different videos that go along with that overarching video that teach about the different parts of the brain. So for example, the hippocampus, what it is, what it does, and how alcohol is affected by it and how that affects you. Another part of the brain that kids learn about is the central nervous system. And so there are 6 different parts of the brain that kids get to know very, very well. So alcohol in the brain, the central nervous system, these are all the different lessons that kids that can be used with students. And again, we have the one how cannabis affects the brain. It follows the same format about as the alcohol in brain as the alcohol in the brain lessons do. So what cannabis is, how it affects the brain, and how that affects you. And we also have a brand new video and lesson plan series about the impact of alcohol and marijuana on mental health. So what is mental health and how does mental health affect your brain? That video is coming out very soon and with an accompanying lesson plan. So in each lesson, you'll find a lesson plan overview. There are content summaries. So the lesson plan overview provides everything that you need to teach the lesson from start to finish. It provides the overview, those objectives, and in this, you'll also have a content summary and a list of materials. Fortunately, our lessons are not very material based. There are printables like our vocabulary cards that you'll see here. You can print these out and you can share them with students. Additionally, all the lessons have components that can be shared digitally. So for example, our comprehension questions. These are PDFs that can be sent out to students and families just to make sure that kids are understanding what they're learning. Our detailed instructions, as you can see here, they're numbered. You don't need to have a background in neuroscience, science, or really to understand fully, to teach these lessons. So you can go through the teacher instructions step by step. They are very easy to follow. And from this, it's just your roadmap of how to teach and implement this lesson with your students. Again, there are 2 to 3 suggested activities and worksheets, all for free to download at asklistenlearn.org. We also have a new element that we're really excited about. If you are familiar with Kahoot, or if you have kids at home who've used Kahoot, we have interactive quizzes that accompany each of the 8 videos and lesson plans. And so these free interactive games really help cement that student understanding about what alcohol is, how it affects your different parts of the brain, and why it's not okay to drink underage. So you can see some of the questions that are part of the Alcohol in the Brain Kahoot. When you launch this, again, Kahoot is a free platform, just like our lesson plans and our resources and our videos. So if you go to Kahoot, you can search for Ask, Listen, Learn, and our various Kahoot quizzes will come up. These can be assigned to students. They can be played independently. You can send a link out if you want families to take a look at them. And so these quizzes are timed. They have fun music. Kids really enjoy using them, and it's a fun way to kind of gamify learning and to get some friendly competition going around that learning as well. And Ian just included the Kahoot link in the chat, so you can take a look at that later as well. In addition, we also have parent resources. So this program information really guides adults with how to start a conversation with kids. As a parent of 2 college students, the conversations that I've had with my kids about underage drinking prevention have grown and changed as they've grown up. I first started working with Ask, Listen, Learn when my kids were in elementary school. The conversations that I had with them as elementary schoolers really started the foundation for openness. And Ask, Listen, Learn has a lot of great resources for parents about how to start and continue that conversation using science and evidence to explain the why behind the no, it's not okay to drink until you're 21. So again, our materials have conversation starters, tips, fact sheets, and more. Um, and also, our parent letters have been translated into Spanish, Mandarin, and Tagalog.
And a lot of what we do with the parent resources is mirrored with what we do in the classroom. So we're a big proponent of making sure that that shared language is kind of across both the classroom content, but also the parent or family content. So making sure that everyone has is using the same terms. So it's a shared message between the schools and the coalitions and also the parents and the communities.
Right. So any of these resources are ones that you can use as well, especially as you work to develop the shared language with those that you work with. So if you have any questions about the things that Tom and I have talked about so far, feel free to put them in the chat. Ian's there to answer questions as they come up, but we'll have a little bit of time at the end, we hope, for some Q&A as well.
So if there's no questions, we could kind of move on to the next section a little bit, which is one question we always get with Ask, Listen, Learn is it evidence-based? Is it based on the existing science? So at responsibility.org, a large part of our what we do is based on making sure that what we're doing is effective. So either based on or evidence informed or evidence based or things that have been evaluated. So that carries through to our Ask, Listen, Learn program. So when we developed this content, we wanted to make sure that it is consistent with the currently available science. So in 2017, when we developed it, we had the scripts and we had the content reviewed by National Institute of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, and then the cannabis module that was released in 2021 is based off of the scientific information and resources from the National Institute on Drug Abuse. And when you're talking to parents and you're talking to schools, this part is super important because it is that fact-based. It doesn't get into any of the kind of moral issues or anything like that. It's really based on what the alcohol does to the developing brain, what cannabis does to the developing brain, based on the research that's out there now. Um, the other part of what we do to make sure that it is as effective as possible is we do program evaluations. We've done two program evaluations on this content, one in 2018 and then one in 2022 after the cannabis and after the alcohol units were launched. And they really answered the questions, and we are looking for them to answer the questions that Leticia mentioned earlier about what what the brain does, how it affects students, and then what that does then to them. So when we did the both evaluations, when we looked at the question, how does the brain work? Students who completed the program demonstrated specific knowledge in both brain anatomy and function. So they were able to answer that question pretty consistently. When you're looking at that next question that she had asked, how alcohol and marijuana affect the developing brain, um, not only were they able to understand and demonstrate an understanding of the functioning of the brain after it is impacted by alcohol and cannabis, but almost more importantly, they had the confidence to share that with others. So that really speaks to the fact that they're comfortable enough with that content that they can talk to their peers, they can talk to their parents, they can talk to other people and give them a little more tools when they are asked to say, if they are asked about using alcohol or marijuana, they can say no stronger and a reason behind it. Um, so much of what we do is that conversation piece. So that's why it's called Ask, Listen, Learn, because we really want to encourage that conversation between adults and youth about the underage or the dangers of underage drinking and cannabis use. So one thing we included in the survey was, did communication with adults about this topic increase? And we found that it did significantly. Um, the other question really is how that affects how the alcohol and marijuana's impact on the developing brain impacts them. Um, and students who had completed the program were had a greater perception of the harmful effects of underage drinking and cannabis use. So that perception has been linked to making better decisions in the future. So if you perceive something as harmful, the idea is that you won't make a harmful decision later in life. So we were very pleased with how that turned out, and we're proud of kind of what the evaluation said. The final thing, which is always nice, is that students liked it. They reacted positively to it. They were intellectually interested in it, and then also they enjoyed the experience of having it rolled out in their classroom. Um, so Leticia went through the general format, and all the lessons have a fairly general format. I'm going to give you a little bit more insight into one lesson plan. So Ian is going to put in the chat the lesson plan that I'm going to talk about, which is the one that's probably most used by schools and people who go into the schools, which is the alcohol in the brain lesson. So I'll walk you through how this could work in a classroom. So as you're thinking about when you go into schools and when you go into like after school programs and things like that, think about how this could be adapted. You can use parts of this, you can use all of it. It's really up to you. But this is located on the Ask, Listen, Learn website under lesson plans, and then you'll see all of our lesson plans here. This one right here is the alcohol and the lesson um, alcohol in the developing brain. All of these are free and able to be downloaded. So all you need to do is go to the website, go to this lesson plans tab, and then you can use these however you want. There's no cost to using it. There's no login either. It just enables you to use it however you want. So this is just an overview of the materials that are included in this. Because it's brain science based, there's some vocabulary that you might need to front load a little bit, and we provide flashcards. We also provide a vocabulary term list and definitions too that you can use to scaffold this learning so students are able to understand what some of these words might be. The instructions are pretty laid out. They have different estimated time limits, but overall the lesson takes about a normal class period that's not block scheduling, so like 40, 45 minutes or so. So in this case, you could start out by doing a pre-lesson activity where you divide students up into groups. And I mentioned about the vocabulary, and this one does a great job of hitting upon that vocabulary that's used in the video a couple different times. And this pre-activity lesson hits upon that a couple times too. So excitatory neurotransmitters and inhibitory neurotransmitters are the two teams, and then they have to do stuff throughout the lesson. The content of this is then introduced through a video, which I'll show you a minute of. All of the videos about 3 to 5 minutes, and they come with this comprehension question. So it'll ask, or it'll have the content about like, what is neuroscience? What are some of, or what do you think vital and voluntary actions are? They'll be able to get all of this information from the corresponding video, which I will show you right now. So I'm not going to show the entire thing. About a minute is what I will show. So this is also on the line too, or online.
Butter and toast. Mix. Robots and tacos. Sorta mix. But kids and alcohol.
Don't mix. You probably heard that alcohol is bad for your brain. But what does that actually mean?
To answer that question, we'll have to learn a little bit about neuroscience, the study of the brain and nervous system.
The brain is your body's control center. It processes information to and from your senses and manages vital and voluntary actions like breathing or keeping a regular heartbeat. It enables you to run and play, learn new facts and ideas, and feel a wide range of emotions.
To do all of these jobs, your brain contains many different parts. Each part is focused on a specific function, like movement, decision-making, memory, pretty much everything.
The brain transmits information throughout the body using a system of interconnected nerve cells called neurons. Chemical messengers called neurotransmitters carefully move the information from one neuron to the next.
Spoiler alert, these messengers play a key role in the way alcohol affects the brain. But hang on, we're getting there.
So that's a good stopping point. You can see it gives a little bit of the background on the brain science, and then the next part really looks at how neurotransmitters are slowed by alcohol being a central nervous system depressant. You can also find, and Ian just put this in the chat too, all the videos that I just showed on on our YouTube channel. There's other ones outside of just the 8 lessons that that Leticia mentioned. So after you watch the video, you can go through and correct any misconceptions that were in the student answers. Go through it, talk about it, have a discussion. This lesson also includes a short diagram or a short reading. And then after they read that, they're going to look and compare about what new information did they learn in the Venn diagram or in the video, which new information did they learn in the video, and talk about what they preferred and the take-home lessons with that. There's additional information about a discussion about how it could work and how alcohol affects it. And then we include 2 activities, and these 2 activities hit home the idea of excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitters. And if you would have watched the entire video, that would have been the next section. So the neuron bobsled is a movement-based one where they're getting up out of their seat, they're going around and acting like an excitatory neurotransmitter where they're going faster, or an inhibitory where they slow it down. And that really hits home the point of the CNS depressant that alcohol is. Then at the end, they do a quick exit slip that's really a formative assessment that you can judge learning by. So that's the lesson as a whole. The next part or the next resource I want to provide you is just a quick self-paced module on marijuana. So this one is great if you don't have a lot of time, or if you have you have a school that has one-to-one devices. You can either send this home for students to do, and then you can come back and have a discussion. Or if you're in a classroom that does have one-to-one devices or is at a computer lab, you can send them the link or put it in their learning management system for them to do. But it is located developing brain-body behavior dropdown, and then there's a section right here about cannabis in the developing brain that will take them to this. There's different sections here that go into the basics of marijuana. What are some of the short-term, long-term effects, its connection to mental health. And then also there's some peer pressure and role-playing simulations and situations that they walk themselves through. At the end, there's a quiz about, or they call it a challenge, but there's an assessment at the end where they have to pass a certain amount of answers. And at the end, they get their score, and they can download a certificate if you wanted to have them turn that in. So that's the 2 resources I had mentioned that would be good for classrooms. If you're interested in learning more about them, you can jump into it and take a look at it. So I will turn it over to Leticia unless there's any questions or anything that Leticia, I haven't been monitoring the chat, but if there's anything that we want to jump in on.
One question that we had about it was whether this is middle school material and how culturally appropriate is this material. This is designed for middle schoolers. We have had this tested with teacher panels. We've had this tested with students, and we take this research and the data from our focus groups very seriously. So I can confidently say that yes, this is designed for middle schoolers. It is standards aligned to middle school Common Core curriculum and national science standards as well. We also have aligned it to the American School counseling standards that ASCA has set. So this is designed for middle schoolers, and teachers do find that it's age appropriate for their middle school students. Now, given that, as a former middle school teacher, I know not all middle schoolers are the same. You know the populations that you work with the best. So you are certainly welcome to tailor this to the populations that you work with. The same thing about this being culturally appropriate. I can't answer for every community out there, But yes, we have tested this. This is culturally appropriate to use with with general populations. Tom, did I miss anything in answering that question?
No, I think that was great. Yeah, I think I'd mentioned it before, but you can take this content and adapt it. Same thing Leticia said, and it's a great way to serve as a jumping off point for the content itself and the actual like brain science, and then make this something that fits to the best needs of your classroom or your community.
I think one question we get too is about families who maybe have faced addiction in their past and some hesitation that teachers and counselors might have in using this curriculum with students who have parents who might have had addiction issues. And the fact that this is science and evidence based, this doesn't come with any judgment. So we really give parents the tools who have even faced addiction in the past to come at this from a science and evidence based learning. So it takes that bias away and hopefully it makes that conversation a little bit, it removes that any personal issues that you might have by just presenting the science and the facts behind what alcohol is, what it does to your growing brain and body. So I hope that helped answer that question. And do please feel free to put something in the chat if you have additional questions in of that nature. Okay, so the next section, underage drinking and underage marijuana use prevention, parent resources. So these resources have been so important to me as a parent who started this conversation with my kids when they were 8 and 10. So my kids now are both in college. I have an 18-year-old freshman and a 21-year-old junior in college. And I know that I am the number one influence on my kids' decision to drink or not drink alcohol. So as my kids have grown up, these resources have been incredibly helpful. I've shared them with other parents in my community about how to start this conversation and how to keep it going in an age appropriate way. So one thing that's really great is the resource on the left, how to build communication for a healthy lifestyle. We know that tips for meaningful conversation include focusing on the facts, like I just said. Focus on the facts and the science behind alcohol affects growing brains and bodies and how it's illegal to drink before you're 21. Plain and simple. It's illegal. It harms your growing brain and body. That's the core message kids need to know. And I also encourage families to listen and ask thoughtful questions. So many times we just want to get the answer out to our kids, but it's important to take a step back to hear the questions that our kids have and to answer them in a really thoughtful way. The next resources for continuing conversations. So one thing that I'm a big proponent of is starting early and continuing that conversation often. The conversation that I had with my daughter in elementary school when we were at a ballpark, when she very flippantly asked as we were walking by the Budweiser stand, can I have a beer? And my answer was no, because you're not 21 and it hurts your growing brain and body. That conversation changed as she got into high school and then is into college. But, one thing I never did is I never dumbed it down. I always presented the facts because we know that kids are really smart. And when you present them with the facts, they understand the why behind the no. And that's critical for our kids and their understanding and their ability to make healthy decisions and saying no. The one thing we're really excited about is the Tween Talks blog series. We're kicking that off this month. So every month for the next few months, we're going to have helpful tips for how to talk to tweens about this topic. So definitely geared toward those middle grades.
And the first one that you wrote, Leticia, was about keeping calm and making sure that you're coming into it at appropriate level too. If you want to, do you mind talking a little bit about that too? I think that's an interesting
Yeah,
one
so
to
as a
begin.
parent, we know that so many times we can get nervous, we can get flustered, but one thing I really encourage parents to do is to keep calm. Take a deep breath, think about what they know the facts, and present them confidently. When you're calm, it'll make kids come back. So it opens that door to a continued conversation, not just about alcohol, but really any topic. And I think that that's really important. When you stay calm, your kids know that they can approach you with anything and everything, and they do. They want you to be that trusted adult in their life that they can have a conversation with openly. So our knowing the facts, I think it's really important for kids to know that most kids do not drink. Our monitoring the future data from January 2024 shows that most kids do not drink. It's not a rite of passage. It's not something kids are doing all the time. And we know this because our data about underage drinking has gone down. That the rates of kids accessing alcohol and drinking before they're 21 or even before they're when they're in 8th grade, those numbers continue to decline. And so that's work that we're really, really proud of. So, in terms of being calm, it's important to normalize that most kids do not drink. And that makes it easier for kids to say no to peer pressure. So we had some questions about how you could sign up to be alerted when our mental health curriculum goes live and other resources. Here, this is a QR code that you can scan on your phone. I can also put the link in the chat and you can sign up that way. But if you would like to be notified of new resources as they go live, you're welcome to sign up. We don't send a lot of emails, maybe once a month at best. We definitely take a break during the summer, but feel free to sign up and I'll pop that link in the chat for you as well in just a minute. But any other questions you have, please feel free to ask them. And I see that Ian has put links to those parent resources in our chat as well. So do feel free to take a look at those.
The QR code is still the same one if you're interested, but I also wanted to provide again our website at the bottom. And also, if you have information or not information, if you have questions for me or the group, this is my contact information, thomas.grane@responsibility.org. If it's a question you think of later, feel free to ask, or feel free to put any questions in the chat as well as we're looking, yeah, towards the end here. One other thing I wanted to mention is we do have some, Leticia mentioned about a couple of new things coming out. If you do sign up for the mailing list, we'll have a update on a new resource that's coming out hopefully later this week. It's a partnership with Discovery Ed about building confidence for responsible decision making. So there's a three video topic series about peer pressure, goal setting, and then also responsible decision making, and then really how that is impacted by the brain. And we have two excellent subject matter experts, one of which you've already met, talking about it. So Leticia is one of the people we see in the video. But we're really proud of that. But we'll send an email when that is launched, probably next week, if you're interested.
So I put the link